They say marriage changes people, but I never imagined it would flip someone like a switch. My name is Michael Reynolds. I am 47 years old, a high school history teacher from Austin, Texas. I have spent most of my life helping teenagers make sense of the past, but I never thought I would become a cautionary tale myself. I thought I had finally found someone to grow old with. I thought I had found someone real. Her name was Elena. She was beautiful, educated, ambitious, and I was proud to call her my wife, at least for the first 2 days. What came after that still messes with my head even now. We had been married for 5 weeks. 5 weeks. And in that entire time, Elena had not touched me once. Not a kiss, not a hug, not even a brush of her hand. And I do not mean emotionally. We barely even made physical contact. The night of our wedding, she smiled, got into her own bed, yes, her own bed, and told me, "It is my body, Michael. You need to respect that." At first I did. I really did. I told myself maybe she was nervous, adjusting to married life, maybe even stressed from the ceremony. But the next night, same thing, and the one after that. She was polite about it, always smiling, always calm. But every time I tried to reach out, her entire body tensed like I was doing something wrong just by holding her hand. Before the wedding, things were affectionate, sometimes even passionate. We took weekend trips together. She would run her hands through my hair while we sat on the couch. She once told me she loved how safe she felt with me. I held on to those moments like they were gospel, thinking they were proof that we had something special. But now I could not help but feel like I had been sold a dream and handed a contract. I felt like I had married a business partner who occasionally remembered to send emails, not a wife. Every evening we came home, ate separately, and retreated to different corners of the house, like two people avoiding each other after a bad roommate match on Craigslist. I asked her once, just once, why everything had changed, why she suddenly acted like I was radioactive. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Michael, marriage is about more than physical expectations. I need space, I need respect. Do not pressure me." And let me be clear, I never pressured her. I was cautious to the point of walking on eggshells. I am not the aggressive type. But there was something in her tone that night. Cold. Dismissive. Like she was not even bothered by how much it was hurting me. Like she had already moved on emotionally. Just not legally. I started keeping my thoughts to myself after that. I began to pull away just a little. I still showed up. Still did the dishes. Still asked about her day. But inside, I had started to wonder if I was just a placeholder in her life. Someone to check off a box. Someone to fill a role. There was no warmth, no connection. Only distance wrapped in politeness. And the worst part? She made me feel like I was the problem. Like my desire to feel close to my wife was somehow selfish. But deep down, a storm was building. I did not know it then, but I was only a few weeks away from finding out the real reason she married me, and once I did, there would be no going back. Living with Elena felt like living with a tenant who barely tolerated me. There was no laughter, no comfort, no shared moments. Our house, once filled with light and music and little notes she used to leave on the fridge, turned into a quiet, cold place. She only spoke to me when it was absolutely necessary. Things like the electric bill being due or a scheduling conflict for the car. Any conversation beyond that felt like pulling teeth. She started spending more time on her laptop, always locked away in the home office or out at meetings I was never told about. And then one night, out of nowhere, she moved into the guest room. I walked in and saw her folding her clothes neatly into drawers in that smaller space, as if this had been the plan all along. When I asked her what was going on, she said, "I just need space to recharge. Do not take it personally." But how could I not? I was her husband. This was our home. We had been married for less than 2 months, and already she was setting up emotional borders like I was an intruder. I stood there watching her zip up a cosmetics bag, and for a second, I felt like a stranger in my own house. I nodded, trying to be understanding, but something about the way she avoided eye contact made my chest tighten. That night, I sat alone in our bedroom, staring at the ceiling, and the silence was heavier than any argument. I told myself this was just a phase. I had friends who went through rough patches early in their marriages. People said the first year was the hardest. I kept repeating that to myself like a mantra. I tried to show more interest in her work, offered to cook her favorite meals, even brought home flowers one night. She smiled politely, said thank you, and placed them in a vase on the hallway table. Not in the kitchen, not in the bedroom, in the hallway, like a decorative item for guests who never came. She did not even hug me, just a small nod. Then back to her screen. That was when I started listening to my gut, and my gut was screaming that something was off. This was not distance caused by stress or fatigue. This was cold calculation. Every move she made felt rehearsed, as if she had been preparing for this exact arrangement. I started noticing things, how she never mentioned long-term plans, how she never referred to us as we anymore. Just me, or my job, or my schedule. She never once talked about buying a house together, or kids, or vacations. It was like she had mentally filed for separation before we had even celebrated our 1-month anniversary. I began waking up early just to avoid the tension. I would leave the house before she came into the kitchen. I would stay later at school, take longer routes home. I hated the way I was starting to feel, like an outsider, like a burden, like I was slowly being erased from my own life. And still, I said nothing. I kept hoping she would come around, that maybe she just needed more time. But deep down, I knew better. I could feel the walls closing in, and a question started growing in the back of my mind. What if this was never about love at all? We met at a school board conference in Dallas. I still remember the exact moment I saw her. Elena Harper, vice principal at a charter school in San Antonio. She was leading a breakout session on curriculum reform, and the way she spoke, so direct, so confident, had everyone in the room hanging on her every word. I was impressed, not just by her intelligence, but by her presence. She carried herself like someone who had already figured out what she wanted from life. After her session, I introduced myself. We grabbed coffee during the lunch break, and that was the start of it all. What I did not realize then was that I was being pulled into something far more calculated than I ever expected. From the beginning, Elena made it clear she was not a romantic. She told me things like, marriage should be practical, not a fairy tale, and I would never rely on a man emotionally. Back then, I thought it was refreshing. I assumed she was just independent, maybe even a little guarded from past relationships. I respected it. I admired her drive, her focus, the way she kept her personal life separate from her professional image. But now, sitting alone in our cold, quiet house, I began to see those comments in a different light. They were not just strong opinions. They were warning signs, and I had ignored every single one of them. Elena never wanted to talk about the future. Not really. Whenever I brought up things like where we would settle down or whether we wanted kids, she would pivot the conversation. She would say, let's focus on the present, or we'll cross that bridge when we get there. At the time, I thought she just did not want to rush anything, but now I realize it was not hesitation. It was disinterest. She had no intention of building a life with me, only of building her own life with me standing quietly on the sidelines. Even when we were dating, I noticed how much she loved control. She planned every date, picked every restaurant, decided what shows we watched, even arranged the logistics of our engagement weekend. I thought it was sweet how organized she was. But looking back, it was not about thoughtfulness. It was about control. She never once asked what I wanted, only told me what she had already decided. and I let her. I kept telling myself I was lucky to be with someone so capable, so put together. I never stopped to ask if she actually saw me as an equal partner or just a stable, predictable piece in her bigger picture. It is strange how your memory shifts when the truth starts to come into focus. Things you once saw as charming start to feel manipulative. Comments that felt like harmless quirks now sound like cold strategy. I could not unhear her words anymore. Marriage should be practical. I would never rely on a man. Security matters more than chemistry. These were not random statements. They were a blueprint, and I had walked right into it smiling, thinking I had found love, when in fact, I had only become part of her plan. We had gone through the standard premarital counseling at her church. Pastor Clark was the one who led it. He was in his 60s, soft-spoken but sharp, with that calm presence you only get from years of listening to couples talk in circles. I respected him right away. He asked thoughtful questions, and he listened more than he spoke. We met with him 6 times before the wedding. Each session felt useful, at least to me. But there was one session that never really left me. And looking back, I realize now that it should have changed everything. We were sitting in that small room, surrounded by framed Bible verses and a faint smell of old coffee. Pastor Clark had asked us, "What does marriage mean to each of you at its core?" I talked about companionship, love, building a family, growing old together, all the usual things a man with hope in his heart might say. Then Elena spoke. Her voice was steady, measured, like she had rehearsed it. She said, "Marriage is about financial stability and having a home base. It is not about romance. That stuff fades. What matters is creating a foundation I can rely on." Pastor Clark nodded slowly and asked her to explain more. She just shrugged and added, "Romance is temporary. Security lasts longer." I remember glancing at her in that moment. I thought it was just her being practical. Maybe she had been burned before. Maybe she was just trying to be realistic. So I brushed it off. I told myself I would bring the romance. I would bring the warmth, that she would soften with time. But now, months later, that one line echoes in my mind like a warning bell I chose not to hear. Marriage is about stability, not romance. It was not just a belief. It was her entire framework. What gets me is how calm she was when she said it. There was no hesitation, no awkwardness, no sign that she even considered love to be a vital piece of the equation. And yet, I sat there, smiling, thinking we were just on different pages that would eventually merge into the same story. I was so eager to make it work, I ignored what was right in front of me. She did not want a husband. She wanted a contract, a shared mortgage, a reliable name on her emergency contact form. Pastor Clark had raised his eyebrows that day, not in judgment, more like concern. He even asked her, "And how do you feel about emotional intimacy?" Elena laughed softly and said, "That is not really a priority for me right now. I need to focus on my career." I chuckled too, trying to play it off like a harmless joke. But it was not a joke. It was the blueprint of everything that came next. I should have asked more questions. I should have listened harder. But instead, I nodded, convinced that love would fill in the blanks. I was wrong. So very wrong. I was not snooping. Let me say that again. I was not snooping. I was just trying to reset the Wi-Fi router. Our internet had been cutting in and out all morning, and Elena had left for a weekend leadership retreat with her school district. She told me not to wait up and that her phone might be off during the workshop. I figured I would troubleshoot the network while she was gone. Her laptop was sitting on the kitchen counter, still open, and I needed to access the admin settings. That was the only reason I even looked at the screen. But then I saw it. An email draft. The subject line read, "Exit strategy." I should have looked away. I should have closed the window, but something about those two words hit me in the chest. My gut had been whispering for weeks that something was wrong. And there it was, sitting right in front of me like a warning label I had not been meant to see. I clicked it open. The message was not addressed to anyone. No recipient, no signature, just the draft. And what I read made my stomach turn. In clean, bullet point form, she had written a plan. A literal plan. She listed short-term goals for her career, get promoted, secure tenure, build her brand. Then came the line that made me sit down. Once tenure is locked in, begin negotiations for peaceful separation. Must maintain reputation and avoid drama. I read it twice to be sure. My mouth went dry. Peaceful separation. Avoid drama. Maintain reputation. Like I was some business partner she would gradually offload after a transaction was complete. There was nothing emotional in the message. No second thoughts, no guilt. Just clear, calculated steps, like she was mapping out a project timeline. In that moment, everything I had been doubting clicked into place. The coldness, the distance, the refusal to connect physically or emotionally. It was not about stress. It was not about needing time. She had never planned to be a real partner. She had planned to use me as a stepping stone, and once she felt secure enough, she was going to walk. I sat there staring at the screen, hands shaking, heart racing, trying to process what I had just seen. Part of me wanted to take a picture, forward it to myself, do something to preserve the proof. But I did not. I just closed the lid. I could not bring myself to dig any deeper, not yet. I stood up, walked out to the porch, and just stood there in the Texas heat, trying to breathe. It felt like someone had knocked the wind out of me. And the worst part? I had no one to talk to. I had not told anyone how cold things had gotten between us. I had kept it all inside, trying to protect her, trying to protect our marriage. But now I knew. She had never been trying to protect it at all. She had been preparing to end it the whole time. I waited until after dinner to bring it up. I did not want to accuse her in the heat of emotion, so I kept my tone steady. We had just cleared the dishes. She was pouring herself a glass of wine, and I asked her, plain and simple, "What exactly did you mean by that draft email? The one titled Exit Strategy?" She didn't flinch. She did not even pause. Instead, she turned to me and said calmly, "You were always the safe option. Don't act shocked." That sentence didn't feel like a slap. It felt like a door slamming shut inside my chest. I stood there, trying to decide if this was just anger talking. Maybe she was bluffing, trying to hurt me back. But the look in her eyes said otherwise. It was not bitterness. It was calculation, cold, focused. I had spent years thinking we were a team, working together through life's struggles. But to her, I was a strategy, a stepping stone, and she was already planning her next move. She was waiting until her position was untouchable before she'd file for separation. It was not a marriage anymore. It was a transaction, and I was the collateral. I could not sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, playing her words on a loop in my head. Safe option. That one stung the most. It made everything we had feel cheap, like she had never really chosen me. She had calculated me. I thought about the long nights we spent helping each other, the sacrifices I made, the plans we built. And suddenly, they all felt like props in her little theater. I realized I had been living with a stranger, one who knew exactly what she was doing. This was not a phase. This was fraud, emotional fraud, a betrayal of the deepest kind. The next morning, while she was at work, I called Rita Monroe. Rita and I had known each other since college. She was smart, loyal, and most importantly, she was now an attorney. I explained everything, from the email draft to the cold confession in the kitchen. Rita did not sound surprised. She had heard stories like mine before. Women or men building their careers with a partner's support, only to walk away once they had secured status. She told me to document everything, save the draft, take notes, do not confront her again without legal counsel present. That was the moment I realized this was not going to end with a quiet conversation and an apology. This was going to be war. Silent, subtle, but real. I was done being the safe option. I was done being used. If she wanted to play a game of strategy, I was not backing down. I had protected her, supported her, and trusted her. And now I was going to protect myself, legally, financially, emotionally. Because this time I was choosing me. When she got the annulment notice, everything about her changed. Just days before, she was cold, distant, barely saying a word unless it was necessary. But now she was in the kitchen again, humming to herself, cooking dinner, like it was 2010. She wore perfume I had not smelled on her in years, jasmine and something sweet. The one I used to compliment her on when we first started dating. She even started setting the table with the good dishes, like we had company coming. I knew her well enough to know when something was off, and this was off. Then came the note. I found it on the bathroom mirror, taped with a piece of pink washi tape she used for journaling. It said, in her handwriting, "Maybe we rushed things. Let's try." That was it. No apology, no explanation, just that. I stared at it for a long time before tossing it in the drawer. A few months ago, I would have jumped at that note. I would have believed every word and tried again. But now I saw the cracks. Now I knew too much to be fooled by a soft tone or a sweet scent. It was not just the note or the dinners or the sudden interest in being a wife again. It was how perfectly timed it all was. Like clockwork. The second the legal process was set in motion, she transformed into someone kinder, more agreeable. But I was not blind. Rita had warned me this might happen. In fact, the last time we talked, she said something that stuck with me. She is not coming back because she loves you. She is coming back because losing you would ruin her plans. That hit hard. And then she added, "Oh, and by the way, her lawyer is getting ready to claim emotional coercion. You need to be prepared." That line, emotional coercion, rang in my ears for days. I had to look it up, just to be sure I understood what she was trying to do. Basically, she wanted to paint a picture where I was the one manipulating her into the relationship, trapping her with guilt or pressure. It was not just insulting, it was a complete rewriting of our story. I never begged her to stay. If anything, I gave her too many chances to leave. And now that I finally took a step away, she was trying to flip the narrative. So no, I did not trust the sudden dinners or the soft glances. I did not believe the note, or the perfume, or the way she rested her hand on mine like nothing had happened. I had seen her true face. And once you see that, you cannot unsee it. She was not back because she missed me. She was back because her plan was falling apart, and I was the missing piece she needed to glue it back together. But I was not stepping back into her puzzle. Not this time. I met with Pastor Clark one afternoon after work. I had been wrestling with the idea for days, going back and forth on whether it was worth digging up old wounds. But something in my gut told me I needed to. I asked him straight out, "Did you keep the recordings from our marriage counseling sessions?" He gave me a long, thoughtful look, then nodded slowly. "I did." "For accountability," he said. I was nervous, but he offered to play them back for me in his office. I sat in the same chair I used to sit in, back when I was trying to fix something that was already broken. The first few minutes were painful. I could hear my own voice. Tired, confused, hopeful. Then came hers. Elena's voice was flat but clear. "I do not believe in physical obligation in marriage. she said without hesitation. I just want the house and the freedom to work. My stomach turned. Then, almost casually, she added with a laugh, if I get tenure, I'm set for life, husband or not. I looked over at Pastor Clark. He paused the recording and sat back. I could tell he was uncomfortable too. That was never meant to be heard like this, he said quietly. But I needed it. I needed to know I was not crazy, not making things up in my head. The person I had loved had been playing a very different game. It was not about love or partnership. It was about leverage. I asked Pastor Clark if he could give me a copy of the sessions. He hesitated, then agreed under the condition that I would only use them if necessary, I promised. On my way home, I stopped by the coffee shop near the university, the one where Elena used to meet her friends. I remembered something odd she once said, that she paid for everything with her personal card so it would not interfere with our accounts. At the time, I thought it was smart. Now it felt strategic. I went home and started digging. Credit card statements, email receipts, anything that might tell the rest of the story. That is when I found the receipt. It was from a boutique hotel in the city, booked for a weekend during a time she told me she was at a Women in Leadership conference. The charge was under her name, but the reservation included 2 guests. My chest tightened. It was not just the lie, it was the precision of it, the way it had been planned and hidden. I took a screenshot, printed it out, and added it to a folder I had started keeping in my office drawer. That folder now held the session recordings, the hotel receipt, and a growing collection of things I had tried to ignore. I sat there in the dark, holding that piece of paper, and I realized something. Love does not have to be returned to be real, but respect. That has to be mutual, and I had been robbed of that. Her attorney stood up with the kind of smug confidence that only comes from believing your client is untouchable. He started painting me as some outdated, bitter man clinging to old-fashioned expectations. Said I was controlling, that I could not handle a modern, independent woman. He claimed Elena had been emotionally suffocated, forced to live a life she never agreed to. I sat still, breathing slowly, letting him perform. But I noticed the way Judge Cross's eyebrow twitched, that small expression of doubt, like he was already poking holes in the narrative. And I knew, just knew, that the recordings would do the rest. When it was our turn, Rita stood with quiet confidence. She did not yell or pound the table. She just asked for permission to play a few audio clips from our marriage counseling sessions. The judge nodded. The bailiff dimmed the lights, and suddenly, the courtroom was filled with Elena's voice, clear and cold. I do not believe in physical obligation in marriage. I just want the house and freedom to work. Then another clip, her laughing, saying, if I get tenure, I am set for life, husband or not. You could hear the silence in that room. Nobody moved. Elena shrank into her chair like a shadow. Her attorney tried to object, but Judge Cross held up his hand. I have heard enough, the judge said, leaning forward. His voice was calm, but sharp like a blade. Ms. Harper, you deceived this man. You used the idea of marriage as a ladder, not a partnership. That much is clear. Elena tried to look surprised, offended even, but it was too late. Her own words had done what months of testimony never could. They pulled the curtain back. The courtroom was no longer debating feelings or blurred intentions. It was now about fact. And the fact was, this had never been love. It had been leverage, strategy, a well-played game that finally ran out of moves. Rita continued, laying out the timeline. How Elena's behavior changed after she got her promotion, how she had moved money without my knowledge, how she refused physical intimacy but kept the lifestyle. Her lawyer tried spinning it, saying she had a right to pursue happiness, but no one in that room was buying it. Not after hearing those recordings. not after seeing how calculated it all was. It was no longer about two people drifting apart. It was about one person weaponizing marriage to climb, then discard. By the time Reed arrested our case, the judge's expression had hardened. His tone made it clear. He had seen through the performance. This was not about bitterness or control. This was about trust betrayed and a legal system catching up with a moral one. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I just exhaled. Not because it was over, but because for the first time in a long time, the truth had finally spoken louder than the lies. The annulment was granted on a Thursday morning. I remember the stillness of that moment, the way the words echoed through the courtroom like the final note of a long, painful song. There was no applause, no victory dance, just a quiet acknowledgement that something false had finally been undone. The judge's ruling was swift. Elena was ordered to return all the wedding gifts and pay a portion of the legal fees. It was not about revenge. It was about clarity. The court had seen through the illusion, and that was enough for me. Afterward, Elena's reputation began to unravel. Her school district, perhaps out of quiet embarrassment or a desire to avoid scandal, transferred her out of state. There was no announcement, no farewell party, no kind words from colleagues. She left quietly, and I imagine she preferred it that way, slipping out before anyone could look her too closely in the eye. As for me, I stayed. I stayed because my roots were here. My classroom, my students, my purpose. All of it was still mine, even after everything. Walking back into that classroom was not easy at first. Some of my colleagues had questions in their eyes, though most were kind enough not to ask them out loud. But the kids, they had no idea. To them, I was still Mr. Harper, the teacher who gave too much homework, who told corny jokes, who made them believe they were more than their grades. And honestly, they saved me. Every lesson I planned, every paper I graded, every time I stood in front of that whiteboard, it reminded me of who I really was. Apart from what I had just been through, I started to teach differently though, not in content, but in tone. I talked more about truth, about recognizing it, respecting it, and telling it, even when it is hard. I encouraged my students to trust their instincts, to speak up when something did not feel right, even if they could not explain it. Maybe I was really talking to myself, but it felt like healing. It felt like something honest growing in the place where something dishonest had died. I had learned a lot, more than I ever wanted to honestly. I learned that charm can be a weapon. That silence is often a warning. That love, real love, does not come with manipulation or secrets or cold smiles after midnight. Next time I would listen better. I would watch more closely. I would not mistake attention for care or sweetness for sincerity. And if I felt something was off, I would not push that feeling away just because I wanted the story to end differently. I am not bitter. I am not broken. I am just clearer now. Life gave me a sharp lesson wrapped in soft words, and I opened it thinking it was a gift. That will not happen again. I have a clean slate now, not perfect, but honest, and that, I think, is a good place to begin again.